Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Are you ready for the next session? Is there so much going in that your heads have gone a bit floaty? Are you all right? You're sticking with it? Are you sticking with it? Oh, well, you need to keep sticking with it for this next one because there's some fabulous information coming up. This is about STEAM and how it's transformed our classrooms. It's about blended learning and project-based learning and STEAM projects. So I'd like to introduce David Cuartielles and Julio Megía.
Perfect.
Can we have a round of applause, please? Thank you. Did I do okay?
Thank you. Perfect.
I have to say, it feels great to be here today. I really feel like Steve Jobs, and you are my audience at Apple. I want to introduce the new iPhone. It's the biggest clicker I've ever seen in my whole life. It's beautiful. So I'm here today to talk about a journey that we made over the last 14 years, where we went from university, going through after-school programs all the way to upper secondary and then back to universities. And first of all, I want to introduce my co-host today. Is Julio Megía.
Thank you.
Here. Julio Megía he suffered one of my experiments that we'll talk about today, and he survived and he's here to talk about it. Thank you, Julio, for coming.
Thank you. Hi.
He flew in all the way from Toledo. My name is David Cuartielles. I'm co-founder of the Arduino Platform, and right now I'm the CTO of Education of Arduino. So today we will explain about this trip we took many years ago. Actually, we started officially on paper in year 2005, which is when the first Arduino board was ever made. But I started working with that before that. I will see how we started making projects at the university level. We understood that the things we were teaching to people could be ported to younger audiences. So we took this down to younger audiences. We were not really invited to come into formal education in the beginning, so we had to work really hard. You know, it's like when you want to play first division soccer, and you have to play third division and then second division. So we spent 4 years working in after-school programs at different places, creating content, evaluating it, until we were finally invited to bring this to formal education. And I really want to transmit the idea that the way we look at it, both as researchers, educators, and as Arduino in general, is that we have to move away from kids and we have to think about educational programs. So this will be hopefully the main lesson that we'll try to transmit to you today. So everything started for me in year 2000 when I quit working as a microelectronics engineer, and I became an educator at Malmö University, where I started teaching software and electronics to designers and artists. And this basically meant I had to unlearn everything I had learned up to that moment. And my goal was to bring digital technology to a field where it was widely unexplored. Of course, people were users of Adobe software, for example, but they really didn't think about how to build their own technological tools or how to build their own interactive installations using technology or anything like that. And this is the kind of things we were doing at this university, and we're still doing these kind of things. This is very common, and you will see this. This ranges from interactive furniture, like this piece here. This is an interactive rocking chair, and when you sit on it and you rock around, then the lights go back and forth. Or an interactive music instrument. As you punch in different blocks, you get different sound loops to enhance the atmosphere in your room. Sound recording toy. You can record a message and then you can listen to it when you lift it. Or this is electronics projects made by design students after barely 5 weeks working with electronics. Day one, they had no idea. And the last day, in the week 5, they were presenting these projects. This was my first experience teaching, in this case with Arduino boards, about electronics to arts and design students. So when I started working with this, I realized that we were transforming the way of thinking about how to use technology in design, from being mere users of the technology to become creators of the technology. Because the moment you start thinking about affordances and how things are going to work from that moment on, you transform your way of thinking about how things are going to be. And the lessons we learn, they deal from how you have to think about working. In my case, I decided that it was a good idea to follow this process of having really quick design iterations in the beginning and then jump into a project-based learning scenario. This means, I will translate this to you, or for you. We'll start a class, and I will come in and tell my students, who of you know how to program? And one person will do like, I will say, okay, I'm going to teach you how to program. Open your laptops. This is the first day, minute number 5 in my class. Open your laptop, we start programming, and I will teach them how to build something with buttons and lights. And by the end of the week, on the first Friday, they have to pitch a project that works using buttons and lights. So we'll do these quick iterations for a couple of weeks, and then we give them an open-ended project for them to work with it and make research and build. This is the first idea. This basically means that technology is just another material. It's like cardboard, pen, and paper. And processes are a lot more important than content. When I evaluate the projects, I don't look at the way that the project is good or bad or was made before. I look at the people actually learn something and they followed a creative process, which is what they will carry with them to the next step, to a professional life afterwards. So after I had been teaching for 5 years at the university, we created the Arduino Platform, and I was invited to teach at an after-school program in Mexico City. And these are the results of a workshop made by kids in a really broad age range, from like 6 to 16. And we designed these robots here, and then they combined it with the kind of crafts that they were learning at this place where I was doing this. And you will wonder, okay, why did this happen? Well, this happened at Palapa, which is one of the most conflictive neighborhoods in Mexico City. So I was remember, the idea is that I was trying to bring the education I did at the university to upper secondary schools. And there is no open door like this, like, oh yes, come and teach here. It was more like, you want to do it, then prove it. So I went to probably the worst place I could go, and it was a culture center in Mexico City, and I started teaching these kids about electronics and software and so on. And I learned a couple of things. First of all, money is not an issue. I mean, every time I talk to teachers about doing things, they tell me the money is a problem because they need to buy something to do something. But in this case, money wasn't a problem. The biggest problem we had is that some days there was no electricity. Some days there was no running water. Some days there was a strike in the subway and nobody could come to the class. So those were our challenges. So I had to learn to plan for something that would work even though the whole infrastructure was down. So teaching digital technology with pen and paper was something I had to learn. I had to move away from the computer for a while. So after several years running this kind of classes in Mexico City, I was lucky enough to be invited to a more formal environment. And this case was in Zaragoza in Spain. And I was invited to create the content for a summer camp. And this is a very fancy, so I jumped from the poorest neighborhood in Mexico City to a 30 million euros building. Okay, this was my jump. And I was teaching electronics and software to kids in a summer camp kind of context. And the idea was to create a summer camp that will introduce the kids to learn about electronics and software. And it had to be edutainment by definition, because it needs to be something that is engaging for the students, or in this case, kids. They aren't really students, for them to come day after day for the whole time. And the experience worked really well. But the second year, we couldn't do the same thing as the first year, because the kids already knew what had happened in the first year. So we had to keep on inventing new things all the time. So the things we learned was that you need some progression even in technology. So you can't just, like, let's say, buy a robot and then teach the same robot again and again year after year. You need to keep on having new things all the time, like in every other subject. And we also learned that art was a really powerful component, because once people knew about the basic technology, they started to use technology in a creative way, exactly in the same fashion that the university students did before. So we saw that it was relevant to work in film, music instruments, etc., etc. And we also realized that we had to learn how to think from very broad to very concrete. So the first time you were coming to take this summer camp, you will be introduced to a lot of different things, just a small bit, like a bit of 3D printing, a bit of programming, a bit of instruments. And the second time, you will say, okay, I'm gonna focus now, I'm gonna just make 3D printing. And I will spend the whole summer just learning about 3D printing shapes, and so on and so forth. Well, I didn't tell you this, well, I actually do live in Sweden. And at some point, we decided to try affecting our own environment. And so we were invited to affect something called fritids. Fritids translates into free time in English. And it's the time that kids have spare between when the time they finish school, which is 2:30, and 5:30 when the parents come to pick them up. And in that time in Sweden, the kids are allowed to do whatever in a safe context. So the kids come in and they can play ball, or they can paint, or they can read a book. Sometimes some fritids at some schools, they have more control activities or more prepared activities, and some others are completely wide open. So we thought it would be very interesting to try this context where the children are allowed to choose whatever they want to, and try to create activities that are attractive enough to keep the kids with us and see how far they can go. So we created a Fab Lab on a cargo bicycle that would circulate between different fritids activities and suggest activities to the kids and see what they would do. And we created activities that had to do obviously with Arduino, which is what I do for a living, but we also look at other contexts like doing virtual reality glasses. So the kids would build their own virtual reality glasses, understand how 3D projection works, and so on. So what we learned in this case is that very quick actions require pre-cooked activities. So you cannot go and make a 1-hour activity to build a whole robot, learn the software, put the batteries in place, make the motors, etc., etc. Have things that change a lot, where variety is key. So the kid on Monday wants to do the 3D glasses, and on Tuesday he wants to play computer games. And they have to be things that are attractive and they are up to date. Or you need to know how to sell these things in an attractive way. And it should have some sort of giveaway. You know, it's like, for some reason, the kids love to bring these glasses home. So we had to make it very cheap so that it will not represent a threat to the activity, that they will get these things home. Which also meant that many of these electronics activities and so on couldn't be really performed in the same way, because the kids could not get these things home with them. So after almost 8 years from the beginning of my journey, I was finally invited by Julio here to run an educational program on formal education, not at one school, but at 25 schools at the same time. And this was what we did from Arduino. It's called CTC. And it's an experience that tries to bring project-based learning and digital technology to schools in a scale-up fashion. So we try it out with a lot of schools at the same time, and not just for a single event, but for a whole academic year. And well, we've been iterating this process over 5 years, but I wanted Julio to come here because he was the first person that worked with me and has seen this thing from year one, has participated for several years in the project.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And so I know Julio's a little bit nervous, so we have arranged this thing as a set of questions. I will ask him questions and deliver some answers for you. So Julio comes from the Sefarad school, which is in Toledo. Can you please tell us something more about your school, Julio?
Yeah. My school is located in the old town in Toledo. Total students are 467 students. Most of them are boys, and 45% are girls. We are participating during 2 years in the CTC project. And one other remarkable data from my school is that most of the students live in a small village or near Toledo, and only 25% live in Toledo city. Most of the students choose technology subject in their last year school compulsory studies. This is a picture in my real workshop in my school. This is a photo from last year Two girls are developing a vending machine. They are programming and coding the Arduino, and they are made a prototype.
So the first question obviously is how is a technology class in Spain in general, so you get the idea. Technology class is at the fourth year in the upper secondary. It's not a mandatory subject, it's voluntary, so the kids choose to take it. And there is a curriculum from the Ministry of Education that theoretically people have to follow.
Yeah.
And so they have 3 hours per week to be spent in the technology class. So how was your process before we did this project together?
Our classes were mainly theoretical. Teachers explained to the students some concepts, theoretical concepts, and the students had to solve some problems or exercises related to these concepts previously explained. Sometimes students had to make prototypes, but usually these prototypes didn't work properly because the students didn't have the tools and materials appropriate to make the prototypes. And some teachers spend a lot of time to try to learning on their own, but this work was really hard for them because they have to spend a lot of time.
Mm-hmm. So this is the context we faced, and given all of the experience I was carrying from before, my suggestion was to create an educational program that would encourage the teachers to learn as they were teaching. So we had to solve 2 problems. The teachers, they need to learn technology as they were teaching technology to the kids because they couldn't stop their work on a day-to-day basis, right? Mm-hmm. So let's talk a bit about the process. This video here shows the final results after 6 months of the students working in different projects. So can you tell us about how the students were working during the classes?
Yeah, our classes, when we started with CTC project with David, our classes changed completely because we're much more practical and much less theoretical. David designed a lot of different challenges for students that students had to solve during the class. It was a training period. Mm-hmm. And for me, this kind of methodology has a lot of positive consequences for students because they encourage their creativity, they can learn from their peers, they learn more actively, they are much more involved. If one of the things I realize of this methodology. And the students have experience with real devices.
So I remember one of the things that Julio told me when we were exchanging emails, because we had a constant contact during this project, was that the students were asking him to open the lab during lunchtime.
Yes, it's true. It's true.
So basically, this is a bit of a summary of what Julio just said. Like, there was a transformation in the classes, and but you didn't mention anything about the fair. The video we saw was about the fair. So the idea is at the end of this project, there is no exams, there is no tests. And the students were not working towards a test, they were working towards a public display of their projects, towards a science fair. Mm-hmm. And this, but that might sound normal for a lot of people, was completely new in Castilla.
Yeah, so I like to say that the last one dot is for me one of the most important aspects we organized with David because we organized a technology fair with the support of the local government of Castilla-La Mancha. Was so amazing for students because they are very proud of exhibiting their work that they have been developed during 1 month, more or less. Mm-hmm. So the final question is, we worked for 2 years together with this, so how has life been after we left you? CTC project in Castilla-La Mancha have kept growing. Because 25 schools started with David and their project, and now I think it could be around 100 schools in my region are developing different projects using Arduino as main device. Okay. And in my school we have developed a lot of several projects, but I think the most remarkable projects are Arduino Bike and Robot Sefarad. Arduino Bike is a real bike in which we install 3 safety automatic system to improve the security of the cyclist. One of them is to measure the distance between the car that is approaching and to the cyclist. This measure is shown in a LCD screen, and so the cyclist can see the distance. Other is a strip LED that emitting light when the cyclists are on the left or turn on the right. And the other one, the last one, is a group of LED that emitting light at night.
Okay. So just to keep it short, because we need to continue. They continued making fairs, which to me this actually means a lot. So the teachers, they still gather together and they arrange. So at the end, the course together, and they can meet many schools together and show the results to one another. And the main outcomes that Julio was commenting to me before we made the presentation is that students feel more confident with technology and more prepared to take a career in STEAM, which is at the end of the day something that is very important for us.
I am convinced that the students now are better qualified to face technological studies at the end of the secondary school.
So this really brings a question for me that I want to raise in front of this audience, and it's something that I'm facing right now at the university. Because when I started teaching in year 2000, every time I said, how many of you know how to program, only one hand was rising. When I enter my master class now and I ask, how many of you know how to program, half the class knows how to program. So this is a new challenge for me as a university professor, because now I have to be prepared to have a two-tiers class, where half the class knows stuff and the other half doesn't know stuff, and presents new challenges, which is very, very interesting. It's a different kind of future challenge for all of us, I think. So I would like to close with a bunch of questions for you. The first one is, if teachers, like Julio here, are to drive the evolution of education, how will this happen? You know, most likely it will not be ministries of education changing things. I hope it will not be. I hope it will be teachers that will be getting the students to become more active. We will, in the end, put a different kind of pressure at the university. Do you think our experience is valuable from this context and for your own context? You know, we have a lot more to tell, but we only have 20 minutes, so please approach us. We will be happy to talk to you. The other big question to me is, are we ready as teachers to adopt project-based learning in general for everything? Can you figure out ways to use it in primary school or in history class or in math class in general? Then, the moment we succeed in transforming primary and secondary education, how will this affect universities? I told you it's already affecting me, but how will this affect like engineering education? Once kids know how to program microcontrollers by the day they arrive to university, what will professors do then? And this is what I like to call the education cycle. Can we actually orchestrate this education cycle in a way that university can help secondary school can help university in making a better education system for the future? So that's the question I think we all together need to answer. So thank you very much.
Thank you very
much. I will
much.
open the floor for questions.
Thank you.
So there is one question. This question that we got from the audience is, can I bring this into my school? How can I get more information? The answer is yes, obviously. And you just need to approach the Arduino booth at the end of this corridor, and we can help you out. And we are open for more questions. If there's any, if there's a question down there. Okay.
Thanks. Before you were explaining that you were teaching your teachers to keep on learning how to program, and you kind of said that there was like a technique that you were using for teachers to have like these learning. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It was very difficult, very complicated question.
Okay, the thing that I typically do is I try to help people focus on the things that interest them the most, and use software in solving their questions that interest them the most. I mean, it's like, I'm not gonna tell you I use flipped classroom or I use this. To start with, I don't really like names. What I was showing you was a bunch of experiments and what I learned through trying. And the thing that really works for me when I work with people like Julio, for example, in this case, Julio is not the typical teacher. I have to say he's a very committed teacher. So before I met him, he was already in the Teacher Association of Technology of Castilla-La Mancha and so on and so forth. But we also face a lot of teachers between 30 and 60 that are forced into having to teach technology, and that's a challenge. And so I try to figure out what is that first interests this person the most. Is it the physical aspect? So then you can learn software through electronics, which is a very nice way. Or is it more the abstract way of solving things? So then you can probably learn more through programming. And if I teach programming, I don't start telling you this is a variable, this is a computer memory. I tell people, can you draw your initials using software? And that is mind-blowing. All of a sudden, in 2 minutes, you learn 2 commands and you're drawing words on the screen. And for that moment on, it gets very easy to just guide people to the things that interest them the most. And the most interesting thing is that I tried this at the university with, adult, if you can say that, adult people at the university. And then I tried with high school kids, and the result is the same. It's all about expectations and try to help people guide their expectations to the right level. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, I'm available for other questions outside. Thank you, everybody.
Thank
See you
you.
soon.
Thank you. Can you join me in thanking David and Julio?
Thank you.
That was really interesting. Explorations in the space of edutainment. Brilliant. Thank you. Right. So, coming up is the final session of the day. It's a panel discussion, and it's about the smart campus, which might be the future of our universities. So stick around for that. Make sure you've got your Glisser up and running. Make sure you're tweeting like the clappers, and we'll see you in a few minutes. Thank you.